The world stands on a knife's edge. From Eastern Europe to the Middle East. From the mountains of Afghanistan to the waters of the South China Sea, the fires of war burn just beneath the surface. But these wars didn't begin with a gunshot or a border crossed. They began long before, with ambition, history, ideology, and silence. This is not just a documentary about what's happening. It's an unflinching journey into why it's happening, who stands to gain, and what could come next if the global order collapses or is rewritten. What if Hezbollah joins the war? What if China backs Iran or the US? What if peace comes, or fails? Welcome to the front line of possibility. Only on ShadowForge TV. And this a world at war. Silent and waiting. The world today is a mosaic of conflicts, each with its own history, grievances, and complexities. To understand where these wars originate, we must look back decades, even centuries, to the geopolitical currents that have shaped nations and borders, fueling tensions that sometimes ignite into full-scale war. It begins with the Middle East, where the Iran-Israel conflict remains a central flashpoint. This rivalry is rooted in a complex history of ideological opposition, territorial disputes, and regional ambitions. Iran, a Shia-majority nation with ambitions of expanding its influence, perceives Israel as an illegitimate state and a threat to its regional dominance. Over the years, Iran has supported proxy groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and various militias across Syria and Iraq, militias that serve as extensions of its influence. The tensions escalated as Iran pursued nuclear technology, claiming peaceful intentions, but fears grew that it was seeking nuclear weapons. Israel, on the other hand, perceives Iran's nuclear program as an existential threat. The possibility of nuclear proliferation in the region has prompted a series of covert operations, cyber attacks, and diplomatic efforts aimed at containment.
Zandagi, Azadi. As I said yesterday and many times before, Israel's fight is not with you. It's not with you, the brave people of Iran whom we respect and admire. Our fight is with our common enemy, a murderous regime that both oppresses you and impoverishes you. Brave people of Iran, your light will defeat the darkness. I'm with you. The people of Israel are with you.
The cycle of provocations, threats, and retaliations has created a tinderbox, with fears that a miscalculation could spark a broader regional war. Recent years have seen covert assassinations, drone strikes, and rising rhetoric, all hinting at a potential outbreak of open conflict, perhaps even a full-scale war that could draw in neighboring countries and global powers. Meanwhile, the involvement of international powers in the Middle East further complicates matters. The United States maintains close ties with Israel, providing both military aid and strategic support. Russia and China, while not always overt, have extended their diplomatic and sometimes logistical support to Iran, seeking to challenge Western influence and shift regional dynamics. The proxy nature of the conflict allows it to flare up in Lebanon, Syria, or even the Red Sea, without an official declaration of war between the primary states. Each skirmish, each drone attack, serves as a warning shot in a long-simmering regional standoff. Moving to Eastern Europe, the crisis between Russia and Ukraine is a story of imperial nostalgia and strategic insecurity. For centuries, Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire, then the Soviet Union. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, Ukraine declared independence, but Russia never fully accepted this new reality. Tensions simmered for decades, but the immediate trigger was the 2014 annexation of Crimea by Russia. Under the pretext of protecting Russian-speaking populations and strategic interests, Russia seized the Crimean Peninsula, a move widely condemned as illegal. Following Crimea's annexation, conflict erupted in eastern Ukraine, where Russian-backed separatists declared independence in Donbass. Ukraine's government sought closer ties with Western institutions like NATO and the European Union, which Russia saw as threats to its sphere of influence. The situation escalated in 2022, when Russia launched a full-scale invasion, citing security concerns, NATO expansion, and the need to denazify Ukraine as justification. This invasion has resulted in a brutal war, with millions displaced, cities destroyed, and a global crisis unfolding. The conflict has not only reshaped Eastern Europe but also tested the resilience and unity of NATO and the European Union. Sanctions were imposed on Russia, military aid was funneled into Ukraine, and the global energy market was thrown into chaos. Meanwhile, the war has reawakened debates about the post-Cold War order, the validity of international law, and the very definition of sovereignty. The human toll, measured in shattered lives and mass graves, is the most visible evidence of what happens when unresolved geopolitical ambitions explode into modern warfare. In Africa, conflicts often stem from colonial legacies, ethnic divisions, and resource struggles. The civil war in Sudan, which reignited in 2023, is a case in point. The country has long been marred by ethnic and regional divides, exacerbated by decades of authoritarian rule and resource control. When the long-standing Omar al-Bashir was ousted, power struggles between military factions and civilian groups erupted into violence. Different generals and militias vied for control, and the chaos created fertile ground for further violence, displacement, and humanitarian crises. In the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia's internal tensions have erupted into open conflict, especially in the northern Tigray region. Ethnic nationalism, federalism, and control over resources have divided communities and political factions. The recent war between federal forces and regional Tigrayan rebels has devastated communities, displaced millions, and complicated regional diplomacy. The conflict has also spilled into neighboring Eritrea and affected relations with Egypt, which has its own concerns over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and water rights on the Nile. Similarly, in Myanmar, a military coup in 2021 overturned a fragile democracy, sparking widespread protests and a brutal crackdown. The military aimed to reassert control, but resistance grew, leading to ongoing civil conflict involving ethnic armed groups and civilian militias. This conflict is fueled by deep-seated ethnic grievances and decades of military repression. Myanmar has become a theater of resistance where local groups, long marginalized, now fight not only for democracy but for autonomy and survival. Across Central Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo has been embroiled in conflict for over 2 decades. Rebel groups, often backed by foreign powers and driven by control of valuable minerals, continue to destabilize the region. The cycle of violence is fueled by economic exploitation, weak state institutions, and long-standing ethnic tensions. Efforts by UN peacekeepers and regional coalitions have provided temporary relief but failed to achieve lasting peace. In Central Africa, the ongoing conflict in the Central African Republic involves sectarian violence and ethnic militia warfare. Rebel groups, often with foreign support, challenge the fragile government, leading to cycles of violence, displacement, and humanitarian crises. These conflicts are not isolated, they are interconnected by regional and global forces. Proxy wars, arms flows, and international alliances turn local disputes into part of a broader geopolitical chessboard. Underlying all these conflicts are deep-rooted issues, ethnic divisions, resource struggles, historical grievances, and the pursuit of power, each feeding the flames of war in different regions. The origins of these wars remind us that behind every headline lies a complex web of history, identity, and geopolitics. They are the result of long-standing grievances, strategic calculations, and sometimes, sheer neglect. Understanding these roots is essential to grasping the present and contemplating the future, for until these foundational issues are addressed, the cycle of conflict is likely to continue. The battlefields of today are vast, complex, and multifaceted, stretching across continents and deep into the shadows of modern geopolitics. Wars are no longer confined to traditional front lines or clear-cut armies, they have evolved into hybrid conflicts, blurring the lines between state and non-state actors, conventional and unconventional warfare. To understand who is fighting and why, we must explore the intricate web of factions, tactics, and technologies shaping these modern confrontations. In Ukraine, the conflict that erupted in 2014 and intensified in 2022 has transformed into a brutal struggle involving regular armies, militia groups, and foreign fighters. The Ukrainian military, buoyed by Western aid, has adopted a combination of conventional defenses and asymmetric tactics, drones, mobile artillery, and smart missile systems, aimed at repelling Russian advances. Meanwhile, Russia deploys a mix of regular troops, elite units, and paramilitary forces such as the Wagner Group, a private military company with links to the Kremlin. These mercenaries operate in the shadows, conducting covert operations, sabotage, and targeted assassinations to destabilize the Ukrainian resistance. The battlefield is also heavily influenced by technology. Drones, both armed and reconnaissance, have become crucial. Ukrainian forces utilize commercial drones equipped with precision-guided munitions, allowing them to target Russian positions with unprecedented accuracy. Conversely, Russia employs electronic warfare systems to jam communications and disrupt drone operations, creating a technological battleground as vital as the physical one. Satellite imagery reveals the shifting front lines, artillery strikes, and troop movements, constantly monitored, analyzed, and responded to in real time. Cyber warfare has emerged as a decisive front. Russian and Ukrainian hackers engage in digital battles to disrupt power grids, leak sensitive data, and demoralize the enemy. Governments and private firms work around the clock to defend critical infrastructure, with cyberspace now considered a domain of warfare as important as land, sea, and air. The consequences of these cyber attacks ripple far beyond the front lines, impacting economies, public opinion, and international relations. Proxy forces are a defining feature of these conflicts. Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shia militia supported by Iran, has engaged in fighting alongside Syrian government forces and has launched attacks against Israel from southern Lebanon. Iran's network of militias across the Middle East, including in Iraq and Syria, operate under the guise of defending their interests but are effectively tools of Iran's regional strategy. These groups often act independently but respond to Tehran's directives, expanding the conflict beyond conventional borders. In the Middle East, the Iran-Israel rivalry has escalated into a shadow war, spanning cyber attacks, targeted assassinations, and covert strikes. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps and its allied militias conduct clandestine operations, while Israel responds with precision airstrikes against Iranian military installations and weapons shipments. The Israeli Defense Forces employ advanced missile defense systems, such as Iron Dome, to intercept incoming projectiles, while their intelligence agencies infiltrate hostile networks to preempt attacks. Somalia, long plagued by militant groups like Al-Shabaab, exemplifies how insurgencies adapt to modern warfare. Al-Shabaab employs guerrilla tactics, suicide bombings, and propaganda to maintain influence. Despite military efforts by Somali forces and international partners, the group persists, leveraging local networks and remote rural areas to evade detection. Drone surveillance and targeted strikes have degraded their capabilities but have not eradicated the insurgency. Across the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia's conflict in Tigray involves federal forces, regional militias, and ethnic armed groups. Tactics include sieges, aerial bombardments, and ground assaults, often accompanied by severe humanitarian consequences. The conflict's roots lie in ethnic federalism and political power struggles, but the fighting has also become a proxy battleground for regional powers like Eritrea and Sudan, each supporting different factions to advance their strategic interests. In Central Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo's ongoing state of conflict involves a multitude of armed groups, such as the March 23 Movement, M23, Mai-Mai militias, and foreign-backed insurgents. These groups control strategic resources, coltan, gold, and diamonds, and use violence to monopolize economic gains. They employ guerrilla tactics, ambushes, hostage-taking, and scorched-earth campaigns, destabilizing entire regions. The Congolese army, often ill-equipped and plagued by corruption, struggles to maintain control, while UN peacekeeping forces attempt to stabilize, often with limited success. The chaos extends into the Sahel region, where groups like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQM, and ISIS affiliates exploit weak governance, poverty, and ethnic tensions. They conduct asymmetric warfare, suicide attacks, kidnappings, and expanding territorial control, challenging national armies and international efforts. These groups blend ideological motives with local grievances, making them adaptable and resilient foes. In Colombia, the remnants of the FARC insurgency have transitioned into criminal networks involved in drug trafficking, extortion, and illegal mining. Despite peace accords, dissident factions continue armed resistance, employing guerrilla tactics and hit-and-run attacks. Mexico faces its own version of hybrid warfare, where powerful cartels operate like insurgent armies. They challenge state authority, control entire regions, and possess advanced weaponry. Their tactics include ambushes, roadblocks, propaganda videos, and corruption of public officials. Civilians often suffer the worst, caught between cartels and ineffective state responses. Across the Pacific, tensions simmer in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. Here, military posturing, cyber warfare, and diplomatic maneuvers are the tools of power projection, highlighting how modern conflicts often involve not just armies but information, economic sanctions, and hybrid strategies. China's gray zone tactics, such as swarming fishing vessels, building artificial islands, and deploying Coast Guard forces, blur the line between peace and war. Take Ukraine. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, it was not simply a violation of borders, it was a challenge to the post-Cold War global order. The West responded swiftly with historic sanctions, freezing billions in Russian assets, removing major banks from the SWIFT system, blocking advanced technologies, and restricting exports that supported Russia's military-industrial base. The economic retaliation was severe. But when it came to direct military intervention, the world hesitated. NATO, despite its strength, chose not to send troops into Ukraine. The risk was clear: a direct clash with Russian forces could spiral into a nuclear conflict. Instead, the alliance walked a careful line, arming Ukraine heavily, providing real-time intelligence, supplying advanced weapons systems, but keeping its own forces behind the borders of alliance members. Fighter jets flew near the conflict zone but never crossed in. This strategy of deterrence without direct engagement was deliberate. It harkened back to Cold War logic: never provoke your adversary into believing their survival is at stake. In nuclear geopolitics, perception is everything. Even rhetorical missteps can be dangerous. So, global powers engage in a performance of strength, without stepping too far. Diplomacy becomes theater. Deterrence becomes doctrine. The United Nations, once envisioned as a body that could prevent such wars, now often finds itself paralyzed. With Russia holding a permanent seat and veto power in the Security Council, any resolution condemning its actions or authorizing collective force is dead on arrival. The very architecture meant to enforce peace has become an obstacle to it. In the Middle East, similar patterns emerge. Iran's nuclear ambitions have long alarmed the international community. The 2015 Iran nuclear deal, or Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was a triumph of diplomacy, an agreement meant to slow Iran's nuclear progress in exchange for sanctions relief. But the U.S. withdrawal in 2018 fractured that effort. Iran resumed enrichment, the region destabilized further, and Israel, feeling cornered, resumed covert operations, sabotaging facilities, assassinating scientists. Talks continued. So did the enrichment. Around this fragile dialogue loomed the presence of regional actors: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Turkey, all recalibrating their positions in a region where alliances are fluid and rivalries ancient. Yet despite the tensions, despite rocket exchanges and military posturing, the response remains carefully measured. Open warfare is avoided. Not out of compassion, but out of calculation. Across Africa, a different silence takes shape. Civil wars rage in nations like Sudan, Mali, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Central African Republic. Peacekeeping forces are deployed, blue-helmeted soldiers often under-equipped, undermanned, and politically constrained. Their mandates emphasize observation and stabilization, but rarely enforcement. In some regions, their presence slows violence. In others, it merely witnesses it. The international community's reluctance to intervene robustly in Africa often stems from complex colonial legacies, lack of strategic interest, and fears of becoming entangled in conflicts with unclear exit strategies. When genocide looms, statements are made, sanctions imposed, but the boots rarely hit the ground. In Latin America, the tools of influence are more economic and covert. In Venezuela, where authoritarian rule and economic collapse have created a humanitarian disaster, the U.S. and others have applied sanctions and backed opposition figures, but avoided overt military intervention. The memory of Cold War interventions across Central and South America still lingers, shaping a more cautious approach. In the Asia-Pacific, the stakes are even higher. China's expansion in the South China Sea, its claims over Taiwan, and its growing military presence are watched with alarm. U.S. aircraft carriers patrol nearby waters. Joint military drills are conducted. Arms deals are made with regional allies like Japan, South Korea, crisis, it's navigating the edges of World War III. But flip the